The Perfect Couple. A totally addictive psychological thriller with a shocking twist. By Jane McLoughlin. Narrated by Sheila Carles. Chapter 1. So what's it going to be, honey? The question hung in the air as the waitress put their drinks on the table, picked up the empty glasses, and glided away. A new start overseas or staying where we are. JC couldn't tell if her husband was joking. The look on his face was serious, those clear blue eyes, still and calm. But he was good at making fun of her without her even knowing, until it was too late to defend herself. I mean it, Jace. Minnesota or England. It's your call. Rob's voice faded for a few seconds, as the air around him seemed to thicken, and the music from the DJ inside the bar slowed down, almost stopping, getting lower and lower, dropping below a frequency that was audible to humans. It was only when she looked around the shady beer garden and saw the college students drinking among the twinkling lights, chatting happily, oblivious to the changes in the sound and air, that JC realized what was going on. The hollowing. It had been so long since she'd felt it. Years ago, before she got married, not since she was a teenager. But what else could it be? A year away from home, Rob was saying, his voice back to normal. That's all it would be. 12 months. 9 months, really, if they wanted to cut it short at the end of the academic year, or make a quick trip back for Christmas vacation, or during the long Easter break. He made it sound simple. And it was sweet the way he asked so nicely, and held her hand, and talked about doing this before the babies came. Like doing an academic exchange to England was all part of the wonderful package that was their lives together. It meant moving to another country, of course, Rob explained. But the country in question would be England, so it would be a familiar place, with the same language. And the English... Sorry, the British, he said. You had to be careful in case you were talking to somebody from Scotland or Wales. Wouldn't think of them as foreigners, not at all. JC nodded, hoping that would slow down his rapid-fire words, if not stop them altogether. They'd be like cousins, you know? Family. And the hollowing came again. No doubt about it. Stronger this time. Muffling what he was saying, so she could hardly hear his words. They'd fit right in, right, babe? Right. Her throat was so tight she had to squeeze out the word. She'd remember that later. The not being able to speak. The start of it all. It would be easy. Yeah? Simple? And so it was. Easy. To get there, at least. New passports applied for and issued, immigration forms filled in, COVID booster shots jabbed in their arms, and then 2 months later, a few days in Chicago, so they could get the paperwork completed at the British consulate before the flight. After the visa meeting, they celebrated by the Chicago River, at a bar on a wide terrace that overlooked the city's iconic skyscrapers. They watched the tourist boats float by, their engines sputtering and spewing out puffs of dark fumes, while Rob pointed out the most famous buildings and told JC about this scene from that movie and that scene from this movie, and did she see the one where... He never stopped talking, JC's husband. He knew so much about so many things. Of course he'd want to share his vast understanding with the entire world. Who wouldn't if they had a brain like his, capable of retaining knowledge, finding solutions to problems, always ahead of the intellectual curve? JC sat still, sucking in the sour cocktail, lime juice, Brazilian sugarcane rum, until the liquid was gone, and then more and more slurping through her straw until the ice melted and there was nothing left in the bottom of the glass. She listened, too. At least she pretended to, while Rob explained. And she looked at his phone when he showed the pictures of the town in Sussex close to the university where he'd be teaching, and the amazing house they'd be living in once they got there. "Look at it, JC," he said. "That mansion will be our home." She'd seen the pictures before, of course, but he was so excited. And the historic town, nestled in rolling green hills, not far from the ocean. "Sea," Rob said apologetically. "I meant the sea. That's what they call it over there." Old buildings, dark stone walls covered with ivy, narrow cobbled streets. The pictures gave her a chill even here, in the bright American sunlight that was reflecting up from the glimmering river and shining off the glass and chrome skyscrapers that loomed over them. She gazed up, awed as ever, in her small-town Minnesota way. But she wasn't scared of them, despite their gargantuan size, because they were modern buildings, safe, knowable. "And one of your grandmothers was from England, right?" Rob said. It was like he was still trying to convince her that they were doing the right thing, although she'd agreed to do it, and she'd packed up all her things and said goodbye to her family and friends. It was as if his mind was searching out new positive angles so he could win her over 100%. After 7 years of marriage, JC knew that merely agreeing with Rob was never enough. There couldn't be a scintilla of doubt that whatever he was saying was bang on the money. He needed her approval, because in his own way, he needed her. "Something about World War II?" he asked. "Yes," she said. She met Grandpa during the war, Cambridgeshire, a little town near an American Air Force base. "You could go there," Rob said. "Find that town. Trace your roots." "Maybe," she said, her heart beating faster, her chest tightening at the thought of following Nana Ivy's footsteps, visiting her grandmother's childhood home. The pictures her mother had shown her of the old cottage in England, as she called it, terrified JC as a child. Maybe it was because the sky, huge and flat, was always cloudy in the pictures. And Nana Ivy, even as a young woman, had worn a fierce, terrifying scowl. Or maybe it was the darkness from inside the house that seemed to seep out of the windows and settle like a thin covering of soot on the gray stone walls. The memory of looking at those photographs, of feeling the hollowing when she saw them, and not understanding what it was, frightened her still. They could have stayed in America, of course, instead of going for the year's exchange. Rob could have landed another job in a better university if he'd held out. After his book was published, he'd been hot stuff, in academic circles anyway. Number 20 in the New York Times nonfiction charts was nothing to sneeze at. Even he admitted that. Though his advance had been modest and the sales weren't all that, despite the New York Times bestseller sticker his publisher slapped on the front cover. "Bestseller my ass," Rob said, but not bitterly. He was philosophical about it. At least, he tried to be. At the beginning. He had an agent. He got invited to events and conferences. But the book hadn't brought the riches or the guest slots on the late-night talk shows he'd been hoping for. He was still just Rob Gibson, Ph.D., associate professor at a small Minnesota State University. Agent or no agent. Book deal or no book deal. With or without the New York Times sticker. And when the second book didn't get published because the imprint was making cutbacks, and sales of the first were not what had been expected, and he hadn't earned out his very modest advance, he was pretty pissed off. Okay, very pissed off. How could the book have sold, he said, when there was no publicity budget? Hadn't he busted a gut for them? Hadn't he gone on book tours and written up pointless posts for academic blogs that nobody subscribed to and that he'd never been paid for? And so, with everything else going on in the country, this was the perfect time to take a break from it all, he said. The Brits were pretty messed up, too. All of Europe was, if you looked closely enough. But nothing compared to what was going on in the U.S. of A. No, America could kiss his ass. That's how he put it. Like America was one of the lazy and know-nothing